What are the expectations at each championship club heading into next season? In today's video, we're going to be discussing just that. Now, of course, in a league as competitive as the championship, anyone has a chance of being right up there come the end of next season, certainly in the playoff race with how tight we all expect the championship to be next season. But for today's video, we're talking about realistic expectations, where I think each club currently stands in comparison to their rivals in terms of budgets, transfers done so far, and generally what's expected of them all and what region of the table can sort of be realistic for each club next season as things stand. I'd like to hear from you guys in the comments down below. What are the expectations for you at your club heading into this season? But without any further ado, let's jump in. So these are the tiers we're going to be chucking each championship club into: survival, comfy, top half, playoffs or automatic. The expectations of different championship clubs heading into this season. We'll start out right at the top, and I think that all three of the sides coming down from the Premier League, the expectations have to be automatic promotion. They have to be there or thereabouts in the automatic promotion race. Leicester, I think rightly so, being considered as the favourites right now. We saw after that James Maddison to Spurs deal went through how many big summer signings they're being linked to right now, the money they've got available to them. They moved fairly swiftly and getting Maresca in as well. I'm excited about how that unfolds over the season, and even the playing squad that's available to them right now. While I'm sure there will be more sales to come this summer, they are looking incredibly stacked in comparison to a lot of other championship clubs. Leeds United, I'm also going to chuck into that automatic tier as the expectation. I think Leeds should be looking to be in and around the top two next season. Now, they are quite a ways behind Leicester and probably even Southampton at the moment, where things have been moving a little bit slower at Ellen Road because of the takeover. They've waited a little bit longer getting a manager in, and recruitment hasn't really started like it has at Leicester so far. But while we're not totally clear on what the playing squad at Leeds will look like heading into next season, the messages we've all heard from the sort of 49ers are all looking very ambitious, and I think this has to be the primary objective for Leeds to get back to the Premier League as soon as possible. Also going to chuck Southampton in there as well. While they did finish bottom of the Premier League, it's still a very young squad, which I'm actually really excited to see how they adapt to championship life. Russ Martin's got a point to prove with that Southampton squad as well, and I also see them being quite ambitious in the transfer market. They've as of yet not sold any of their saleable assets, but I'm sure a few of them will leave this summer. But all things considered, I think each of the three relegated clubs from the Premier League have to be targeting automatic promotion. On the flip side of that, the teams coming up from League One, I'm going to chalk Plymouth into the survival category. I think that has to be their primary objective heading into next season, and the expectations there at Plymouth are for survival in the championship next season. Now, they've already started their business quite promisingly. I think it's fair to say, using the loan market quite cleverly, even looking into the European market as well. And I think that a good stable season in the championship where they look to re-establish themselves as a team in the second tier, I think Plymouth fans would be happy with that. Sheffield Wednesday, I'm also going to chuck into the survival category. It's all been a little bit turbulent at Hillsborough so far with the whole Darren Moore fiasco. There's been mixed messaging coming out of Sheffield Wednesday in terms of budgets right now and how much is there to actually go ahead and invest in this squad coming into the championship this season. But from a Wednesday point of view, regardless of what happens, I think the primary objective will be survival, and then they sort of go on from that point onwards. Now, Ipswich are a little bit different, I feel, to both Plymouth and Sheffield Wednesday, because we know the backing that they've got behind them at the moment. The expectations are already running rampant. I did a bit of a deeper dive on Ipswich last week. Make sure to go ahead and check that video out on the channel. And to be honest, I feel like the expectations at Ipswich are more than just survival. I feel like they're expecting to maybe be a bit comfy, and actually top half, maybe even pushing on to playoffs. I think it would be unfair to say that the expectations at Ipswich for next season are to be in the playoffs. I think that while a lot of people do see them being in that picture, that would be asking a lot of them right now, and we'll have to see what other deals they do throughout this summer. But really impressed by the Jack Taylor signing, the playing squad they've already got in there, and the resources they have to further improve their squad. I honestly think that the expectations at Ipswich are to be in and around the top half next season, which is crazy for a side coming up from League One. When it comes to Huddersfield Town, for a large portion of that last season, they were the worst team in the Championship, but the way they were performing under Neil Warnock was almost like a playoff outfit. Now, how that translates over a full Championship season and whether or not we do get that same magic from that Huddersfield squad consistently under Warnock next season, I think the expectations realistically should be for Huddersfield to be comfy next season. They don't want to be involved in another relegation scrap, and I think that with Warnock there and sensible recruitment this summer, that's where Huddersfield should be, but there's still a lot of moving parts where I'm not totally sure on where we stand right now. Maybe they could fly up the league under Warnock, but I think a realistic expectation for Huddersfield right now should be them being a little bit more comfortable next season under Warnock. Birmingham are a fascinating club right now, and some of the deals they've done so far sort of going under the radar. I like the deal for Ethan Laird. They've got Christian Bielik through the building on a permanent basis. Miyoshi coming in as well, one that I'm really excited about. Now, Birmingham are always a side who I have to sort of temper my expectations with, because they always find a way of having some sort of implosion throughout a season, but there is more promise around Birmingham at the moment, and maybe they can break that curse of, you know, finishing above 17th like they failed to do in the last several Championship seasons. I feel like the expectations at Birmingham as things stand should be that they're comfy. They shouldn't be involved in the relegation scrap. They should look to have that consistency in their play, and if they get a few more, you know, of these savvy deals over the line, then who knows for them. I think it's too early to go with any top half or playoff shouts for Birmingham despite some impressive recruitment so far, and I think that the expectations should be for them to be above that playoff, that relegation battle. Norwich City, they were a big underachiever last season, arguably one of the biggest underachievers in the Championship. The expectations at Norwich last season were automatic promotion, but they fell well below those standards. I think the expectations at this season have to be playoffs as a bare minimum. Wagner had the second half of last season to work things out, and while there were signs of promise, still a lot of inconsistency in their play. There's been a fairly high turnover of players so far in terms of some of the old guard moving on and bringing in some fresh faces, and I think that as a bare minimum, Norwich have to be in the playoff battle and really, I think, getting over the line next season. That's certainly the expectations I feel that are on that club at the moment after such an underperformance last season. But with that being said, a lot of people are fancying Ipswich to finish higher than Norwich next season, so yeah, we'll wait and see on that one, but I do feel like the expectations should be higher on Norwich because of that recent history. West Brom are a bit of an impossible one to call right now because of the chaos going on behind the scenes. Had that not been the picture right now and everything was sort of fine behind the scenes at West Brom, then I'd say the expectations probably would be to go on and finish in the playoffs. I certainly think that they've got a capable manager in Carlos Corberán, and while they have sold Dara O'Shea, I still think it's a squad that's capable of being there or thereabouts, certainly with the right backing. But because of all the chaos going on behind the scenes at the moment, I feel like the expectations probably will be brought down a notch, and so I'm going to drop West Brom into top half. But without knowing the full picture of what West Brom will be looking like at the start of the season, because the ownership issue, they're a bit of an impossible one to call right now in terms of a realistic expectation. They could be literally anywhere. Quite similar to Norwich, I'm going to say with Watford, the expectations are to finish in the playoffs. Last season was a massive underachievement by their standards. They were expected to be in the automatic promotion race, but in the end they fell well below that, finishing adrift of the playoffs in the end. It's an interesting strategy they've gone for with Valérien Ismaël. They're certainly being linked to players at the moment who would fit that style of play, and I think if they do nail the recruitment this summer, then it has to be playoffs as a bare minimum that they are aiming for. That certainly should have been the case last season, but they fell short on that feat. And I mean, if Ismaël's not looking like he's going to deliver a top 6 finish, I'm sure that they will, you know, not hesitate in parting company with him, and they'll get someone else in through the door later in the season. Rotherham United, I'm going to say survival once again is the aim for Rotherham. You could maybe argue that they'll look to push on from that a little bit, and the expectations will be to be comfy, but I think with how strong we expect the Championship to be next season, right from the top down to the bottom, considering Rotherham's budget compared to everyone else that they will be up against, I think Rotherham's main aim once again will be to get over that dotted line and to go ahead and survive. There's definitely the potential there to kick on, but with how strong the Championship's going to be at the bottom, I think the main objective has to be survival again for Rotherham. Blackburn Rovers, they're an interesting one. They were in the top 6 for a hell of a lot of last season, but ultimately fell short with a bad run towards the end of the season, and it's a full campaign now that John Doyle Thomason's got in the Championship under his belt, and the recruitment so far I do think has been fairly promising. While they have lost Brereton Diaz, I think they've done some quite clever scouting from around Europe. I'd say the expectations at Blackburn are to be top half pushing into the playoffs, but I don't think that Rovers fans would see it as, you know, a vast underachievement if they didn't finish in the top 6 next season. I think that top half pushing playoffs is where about the expectations currently sit at Blackburn, and depending on how much more business they do, that could push them up into that bracket. But right now I'd say the expectations base level for Blackburn are to be a top half side next season. Middlesbrough, I'm going to say playoffs as a minimum for them. Definitely perhaps pushing automatic promotion. Once again, depends on the business they do. It's all been quite quiet at Middlesbrough so far. Obviously the loanees had a key impact on their season last time around, particularly, you know, Ryan Giles, how good he was in terms of a creative outlet, and Cameron Archer and the goals he provided in the second half of the season. But there's certainly a budget there to spend. Michael Carrick and how good he was with that Borough side last season had them performing like an automatic promotion side, and with the right recruitment I would say that definitely could be the case. But right now I'd say the expectations for Middlesbrough are to be in the playoffs next season as a bare minimum. Preston North End, I'd love to say, you know, we'll push on next season for top half, maybe challenging playoffs, but as things stand I'd say the expectations are for Preston just to be comfy really. I am a little bit apprehensive about the lack of business at Deepdale so far. Obviously I'm a fan of the Calvin Ramsey deal, and I think that loanees will be very important to Preston this summer. It is a market that we have done well in over the past couple of seasons, but as things stand right now with how strong I expect the rest of the Championship to be and the lack of movement in and out of Preston at the moment, yeah, a little bit apprehensive. I'm going to say the expectations right now are just for Preston to be comfy and not dragged into any sort of relegation battle. Also think it's a similar occurrence with Stoke really. Once again, if they nail recruitment under Alex Neil, they had that spell last season where it seemed like they'd nail things, then maybe the expectations would be for them to sort of rise up the league, top half, maybe playoffs. And the expectations have been sky high at Stoke over these past few years, and they've always gone ahead and underperformed them. But because of those underperformances in years gone by, I feel like this season for Stoke, the expectations have taken a massive drop off. There's not been that much movement in and out of Stoke, quite similar to Preston so far. So without seeing what they're going to do this summer, it's tough to say the expectations are much more than being comfy right now, but that will depend on the business they do. Hull City, I think the expectations for them is quite similar to Blackburn, top half, bare minimum, being a side that's pushing on to finishing the playoffs. I think that Rossignol showcased some real tactical nous last season with that squad. It's an ownership who's willing to go ahead and back him as well. And on the whole, I think there's good vibes around Hull at the moment. So top half finish, I think, would be the expectation, with a view to push on for a top 6 place. With QPR, it still feels like there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of players that could still leave. Sonny Dieng, Chris Willock both being linked with a move away from the club at the moment, and it feels like this is going to be a transition season under Gareth Ainsworth. I think the jury's still out whether or not Ainsworth is the right man for QPR long term moving forward, but I think the baseline of expectation for QPR right now is probably survival. I don't think there's massive expectations being placed on that squad, because we are expecting an overhaul of players and playing style and how they will adapt to Ainsworth over a full campaign. So right now, don't think the expectations are that high at QPR. I think it is just for survival. I also think for Cardiff as well, there has been talk of ambition, obviously with the new manager coming in and some moving parts behind the scenes, but with the club being under a transfer embargo for the summer, them relying on free transfers in the loan market, I think we're probably going to have to put them into the survival camp as well. Last season was a massive overhaul of the squad, but so many moving parts in terms of managers coming and going, and in the end, due to point deductions, they probably found themselves quite lucky to survive in the end. But once again, they're a club where I don't think massive expectation is on their shoulders because of the issues behind the scenes, and I think that the baseline expectation is just for survival at the moment. Sunderland are a really interesting one because last season was a massive overachievement. No one saw them getting into the top 6, but now that they've gone ahead and done that and they're continuing to add to the squad, we've already seen several big signings for Sunderland this summer that they have spent a fair bit on. I expect them to use the loan market really well this season as well as they did last time, and if they do continue to strengthen, then the expectation probably would be the top 6 again for Sunderland. They're a massive club, they've shown they're capable of doing it, and with a good manager like Mowbray and continuing to have that backing going into that squad with a youthful core, no reason why that shouldn't be the expectation again at Sunderland. Coventry, last season similar to Sunderland, a massive overachievement by them to get all the way to the playoff final. I do feel as if they're in a slightly different situation to that of Sunderland, and this one depends on a few factors. If Gyökeres and Hamer were to be there for the entirety of next season, Callum O'Hare comes back into that side as well and they strengthen, then it would be fair to say that playoffs would be the expectation again. But I think I'd drop them to top half being the expectation because we expect quite a bit of change at Cov this summer. With Gyökeres on his way out, we expect Hamer probably to be the same as well. It feels like a little bit of a rebuild there for Coventry, but some good early business by them, and there's no reason why they can't be pushing up in and around the top 6 again. I think they will be sort of between those two categories in terms of expectation. Fairly similar story for Millwall as well, another side who I think will be expectations will be around top half with the view to kick on and finish in the playoffs. They were in the top 6 for a hell of a lot of last season, but ultimately fell short with a dodgy run towards the end of the season. If Zian Fleming does stay, I think the potential for him and Nisbet up front is a really exciting partnership. They've added to their defence well with Joe Bryan coming into that squad as well. So Millwall, I'd say between sort of playoffs and top half category in terms of expectations. I'd maybe chuck them into the playoffs because they were there for so long and they've gone ahead and continued to add to their squad, and they've not yet lost any big players. Swansea, I'm going to say their expectations are top half, once again with a view to kick on into the playoffs. Another team who are sort of between these two categories along with Millwall and Coventry. Quite a bit of turbulence over there with Russell Martin leaving, that whole saga dragging on for quite some time, but Michael Duff coming in, a manager who did really well at Barnsley last time. I think Swansea will be there or thereabouts, but expectation for Swans I'd say is top half. Finishing off then with Bristol City, I'd say they're probably between the comfy and top half category. Quite some time now where Bristol City have been going on this overall rebuild. Obviously with Nigel Pearson, we expect Alex Scott to move on this summer, but how they go ahead and reinvest that money within the rest of the squad remains to be seen. Some decent early business by Bristol City, it has to be said, and there's definitely a view where they will kick on this season into the top half, but minimum expectation would be for Bristol City to be comfy, I think, to then look to kick on. But there we have it, guys. Those are my sort of expectations as things stand for each championship club. Where do you stand on all these championship clubs at the moment? What would you say are realistic expectations for each of them? Obviously, not every championship club will achieve their expectations this season. We've got 3 in the automatic promotion zone, too many in the playoffs at the moment, etc. But I'd like to hear from you. Who do you see being the over and underachievers next season? Apart from that though, guys, that will wrap it up for today's video. If you did come to enjoy, make sure to leave a like and do stick around and subscribe for some regular championship content. And I'll see you all in the next one.